Hello, everyone. It's Quacy Smith, your candidate for Congress in Arizona's 9th Congressional District. And I want to take time to thank you for tuning in today to another episode of our podcast, The Challenge We Face. This has been a remarkable series of discussions and interviews and things that we've talked about, and we're continuing that today. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing it. And please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and all of our social media pages to keep up with what's going on in the campaign. We have a whole lot of great stuff coming your way as we make our way toward Washington. So thank you for tuning in today to the challenge that we face. And I'm so excited. It's always a great time coming out here to Buckeye to spend time with Patty and Chuck Wyrick. They are remarkable citizens that live out in our district. I think they're some of the finest folks I've met on this side of town. And I'm just grateful to be back in their home again. Patty, Chuck, thank you for having us again. How are you all doing?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Doing fine.
Doing
It's
great.
our pleasure to have you back here again.
Thank you so much. Your hospitality is always amazing. We've actually hosted events here at the house and gotten a chance to know each other and talk family and stuff with each other. And so thank you. I think this is a part of the heartbeat of what, makes, us Americans and citizens and cordial with one another, of course, and certainly fellow citizens out here in Arizona's 9th Congressional District. This year, and it seems like to me it's just been so long, this, if I could use the term, political unrest that we've been in for so long. And I was telling someone recently, we're literally in the process of a political reformation, if people don't realize it yet. And what we are to become is going to be predicated on who we, the constituents, the voters, the citizens, decide we're going to be. I've said it, that this election really is about the heartbeat. This is the stress test election. It's going to determine the heart of the nation. It's going to set the trajectory as to where the nation goes from here, because it's so polarized. People think that America is an old country. On the trajectory of things, as far as the major empires and nations, America is very, very, very young. And we're going through one of those reformation processes where this election will really determine the direction of the country, which way will, and it's bigger than a party, it's bigger than a person or persons. It's about who we are as a people, and it's good to always meet folks like you all that understand, that have made decisions about who and what the nation should be. If I understand correctly, you all are currently, used to be Republicans. Am I
Correct.
talk to me about that.
Well, I was a Republican. I grew up in my childhood in Orange County, California. And if anyone is familiar with California, when I was growing up there, it was probably the most conservative county in the country.
Sure.
And so I grew up that way, naturally becoming a Republican. But as I got older, I became more of a moderate Republican. Never voted straight ticket. I always tell people when Reagan was running for president, I did not vote for him, which was a terrible thing to my family, because I used to say he was an actor. How can you vote for an actor for president? It just didn't seem right.
Yeah.
Also, there were a lot of Vietnamese protests about the Vietnam War. And so Reagan, when he was governor, closed our college campuses. So we didn't get to finish our fall semesters until spring semester, and I'm going, I'm not voting for this man. He kind of delayed my college experience. And then as time went on, I just was getting saddened by how the Republican Party had changed. So after Trump won the election, Chuck will tell you, I came out and I was crying. Literally, because my dad was an airline captain, flew from LA to New York. So I had seen all the newspaper articles about Trump and his family. So 6 months into his term, I realized I could no longer be a Republican. that my heart really was more for the people, not the corporations, more for the schools, not corporations.
Yeah.
And that is where my turning point came.
So it's as recent as when President Trump was elected to office in 2016, the first time.
Correct.
I grew up, a very conservative family, very conservative, small town out in Blythe, California. We've talked about it, before. Conservative church, the Church of God in Christ is a very conservative Christian. I mean, back when we were growing up, they've changed some now, but women couldn't wear pants, couldn't wear makeup. We couldn't go to the movies. We could, you know what I mean? It was very, evangelicals think they have something going. You grew up in the Church of God in Christ. It's the holiness church, you know what I mean? We couldn't cuss, couldn't spit on the ground. You know what I mean? It was, yeah, they wanted us to be Jesus's first cousin, I think, you know what I mean? And so it was very, very conservative, upbringing. I appreciate my upbringing in the church. And although I've always been a Democrat, I've come from conservative, roots, if you will, and so I always understood both sides, of how it would work. But I think I share that same feeling that you were kind of pointing to a minute ago after President Trump was elected into office. I remember I was talking to a fellow lawyer friend of mine that lives out here in the district, and I was telling him, he's a Republican. I said, I just felt like something has happened that didn't include me. And a whole lot. I think something happened that is going to pierce and shave off half of the electorate, the citizens of them, and I hoped and I prayed like a good Christian ought, as they teach us to in Sunday school. Prayed. I said, well, the man's president. Let's give him a chance. I got to be honest. Let's give him a chance, and every day, but pray for this, man. Let him do better. Don't come on. You can't insult the reporter. And every day, Patty, literally every day, it felt like it was something else.
Yep.
To where you made it to 6 months, and I think I made it to about 9, and I was just out of gas with It's like, now come on, this is stuff I wouldn't let my children do or say. And I think what was more disheartening for me was all of the folks that would turn a blind eye to simple behavior that is just fundamentally not okay. And did you ever have that feeling that, like, why are we propping this person up when there are other people, better choices?
All the time. And I kept thinking, I raised my children to be kind.
Yeah.
I raised my children to be honest. And there is an incident where our younger son got into a group of bullying one of his friends. And I went with him to his friend's home. And I said, you need to apologize to him. His mom and dad were so grateful. And it was a lesson that he learned. You don't lie about anyone. You don't lie about anything. You tell the truth. You two have grown up as good friends. Just because you're in high school didn't mean that you had to go with the other group. Those are the kind of values that we taught our children. Mm-hmm. And to see this man come into office who disintegrated handicapped people, Gold Star families, military people who had died, it made no sense to me whatsoever when I brought my children up to respect people, to be honest. That honesty and faithfulness will get you where you need to be. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, everything turned upside down.
Yeah. I even look at, and this is just something as a lawyer, with the whole trial that's going on. Everybody, in this country, everybody has the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, and you let the court process play out. You learn courtroom decorum and respect. That's for the court, for the system, because we're a nation of laws. And I've just watched off and on, not all of it, but how this guy's supposed to be wanting to be the president now. The president, that's the executive. Your job is to go execute the laws of the nation.
Correct.
And to respect them. You can't execute laws that you don't respect, and rules and boundaries. And to walk right out of the courtroom, straight to a camera, and badmouth the judge. Just because you have a right to do something doesn't make it right. And I don't understand how you don't understand it. You don't walk out of the courtroom because the gag order doesn't say you couldn't, and you test and look at how many times a judge has had to rope him back in and say, you can't say that. I'm gonna throw you in jail if you can't. I've been in law for some time now. Anybody else would have been in jail a long time ago. It would have been in jail a long time ago. You don't get to. There's certain things, and it disheartens me. For me, I know I'm running for Congress, but for me, it's so much bigger than Quacy going to Congress. Somebody has to come, and more somebodies than me, and need to be somebody from both sides to come in and say, enough of this is enough. Because how do you let this go on so long to where it's literally denigrating who we are as a people?
That's, I think, something that's difficult to come to terms with. You all of our lives, we're both in our 70s, and so all of our lives, you were told to respect the law. You may not agree with it, but
Right.
you need to respect it.
Right.
And to see this man getting up, I think it's sad that a judge and his family have to get security wherever they go.
In the United States of America in
Isn't that
2024,
horrible?
a judge.
I just think that's one of the saddest things ever. And why people are not up in arms about that, I think is very heart-wrenching.
It is.
It's like, why aren't you out there saying something about the way this man and his people are doing and what they're doing? And which leads us to the Republicans coming now and saying things that he's not allowed to say. Mm-hmm. And how dare them go into a court in the middle of session, because they've been out in the cameras,
right,
disrupting the court proceedings because they're making noise and they're on their cell phones and they're talking. Any other judge in any other circumstance would have thrown those people out of court.
Absolutely.
It's unconscionable that they behave that way.
Yeah, and it's allowed, and I think it's severe error, but it's allowed solely for the purpose of political expediency. Mm-hmm. And to me, someone that has sworn to defend the Constitution of the United States and have done it several times, it's disturbing. It's unnerving. We are a nation of law. There are several times I'm in a courtroom, I just outright disagree with what the judge said. Sometimes I got the law to prove that the judge is wrong. But when I'm in his or her courtroom, it's yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, your honor, no, your honor, because we are a nation of laws. And I think that we're getting away from that to prop up. And I think this is where you see this political unrest. I can't tell you the scores of Republicans that say, I'm in that same place. I cannot do this anymore. Not that, because tomorrow matters. That's what this election is about. Tomorrow. And when I say tomorrow, I mean the day after the election. Where are we going as a nation? Can you imagine 4 more years of that?
No, because for me, 4 more years means that's it. The country that we know and love, the
Yeah.
laws that we know and love, the freedoms that we have compared to the rest of the world will be gone.
Yeah.
And that is what I think is so scary.
Yeah.
We've lived through Democratic governors, Democratic presidents, Democratic senators. We've lived through Republican governors, Republican senators, and Republican congressmen that have truly tried to do what is the best for their constituents.
Absolutely.
The politicians today, for me on the Republican side, are doing only what's best for the Republican Party, not what's best for their constituents.
Right.
And it used to be that a senator or a congressman would put forth a bill or a law that was best for their state, not what was best for their party.
Yeah.
And you used to get Democrats and Republicans that voted together or against each other, but together.
Right.
In other words, some Democrats voted for this way, some Republicans voted with the Democrats, some Democrats voted with the Republicans. But it seems like they're not allowed to do that anymore.
Yeah, and we've lost that political, as you explained it so excellently, that political fluidity, if you will, that says, listen, if it's right for the people, if it's right for the country as a whole, never mind. We can't put the party before all of these things, and we certainly can't put party before principles that have founded this nation. And I think that's where a lot of frustration is coming, particularly from a lot of Republican voters, a lot who have become independent. The blessing to this campaign has been, of course, the Democrats have been, amazing. I'm a Democratic candidate, but the number of Republicans and independents that say, we get it, because it's not just good enough to point to President Trump. You have to get rid of those around him that keep propping him up, that are in office, like our congressman out here, Paul Gosar, and some of the other ones. I am as disheartened about my congressman, and that's what he is right now. He's my congressman.
Correct.
But I am disheartened by this man to the same degree I am about the president. It's time to move on.
It's frustrating with Gosar.
Yeah.
Because he has gone and spoken to groups that are not a part of our American right way to live.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you vote for someone who goes and speaks to groups that are against our way of life? Right. It makes no sense. Or to vote against bills that are here to protect Arizona. Part of that is immigration.
Sure.
Well, why aren't you voting for more money?
Right.
Why aren't you talking to local officials in Arizona about giving our children a better education?
Sure.
I think it's embarrassing that we're 49th in the country in education.
Yeah.
And how people are not understanding that or seeing that is totally beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
Because as you know, the federal elected officials for our state, our congressmen and our senators,
Sure.
they can speak to local
Absolutely.
legislators. They can speak to local mayors. Mm-hmm. They can push that along.
Sure.
I just don't understand how they do not find it embarrassing that our education is far below where it should be. Why aren't you funneling more money? Why are you wasting your time and your money not doing what's right for Arizona, only doing what's right for the Republican Party?
Sure. I had a high schooler ask me a few weeks back after they saw some of the record of some of the president. When I say record, I'm talking about the rhetoric and the blah, 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 all of this hoopla and bombast and bluster and stuff that they spew out, and some of this stuff from Congressman Gosar and even some of the other congressmen here in the state, Biggs and some of the others, and a high schooler. This was the question. Why is he allowed to run for office?
Good question.
A high schooler gets it. high schooler gets it. Why is he allowed to run for office? There should be some things that, because at the heart of the nation, we know that there are certain things. We're not looking for perfect candidates. There aren't any. But we sure need some doggone better ones. Better than these that are not. There are certain, everybody has, I don't necessarily care about that you and your wife had a rough spot, or you and the husband had, just get married. The way somebody asked me how you spell marriage, I said you spell it WORK. It's work. it's every day. You know what I mean? You got to work, and work doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, but you got to work at it. You got to, So I don't, everybody has bumps in the roads and all that stuff. But when someone that is so fundamentally flawed as a Donald Trump, a Paul Gosar. These are just, and I can go down the list. Marjorie Taylor Greene. I can run them down. These folks are just simply so fundamentally flawed that I agree with the high school kid. Why are they even allowed to run for office?
That very smart, intelligent child to come up with that, because it's a question I haven't even asked myself. Why are they allowed to run? My question is, how do they keep winning? I don't understand this. Right. Because even as a Republican, I did not like Gosar.
Right.
It was like, how does he keep winning?
Yeah.
And that's what's disheartening. And part of that is how politics have turned so nasty.
Yeah.
Used to be a respectful vocation to go into. You used to be able to run, and yes, maybe your opponent would exaggerate against you or for him or herself at one time, but the dirty-handed, under-the-table tricks that they're using now is, what are we teaching our children?
Sure. Yeah, I was having a conversation with, a couple of my, Republican friends and a couple independent friends. This is years back, and I remember telling them, we'll long for the days of the congeniality amongst our politicians, such as the late Senator McCain and other ones. You'll long for those. They were these folks, they got along, you know what I mean? They didn't agree on everything. I saw Senator McCain gained so much respect from me, even as a Democrat, when somebody from extreme right got up and was saying something that just was untrue about then President Obama, or I think he was Senator Obama, or was President Obama then. And the senator literally stopped the lady right in her tracks. The videos, I said, no, ma'am, no, that's not true. He is a good man. He's a family man. We just disagree on politics, and turned and went right to the next thing. We'll long for those days where we could be different but not divided, where iron will sharpen iron again. And now it seems like we're just in this political gridlock. The answer to that question that young lady asked is found in, I think, and I want to hear your thoughts about this. It's really about, why are these people allowed to run for office? Or a better question is, how do we fix it? Because it's not a matter of when we fix it. I fundamentally believe that if there is not a hard shift this election, I agree with you, Patty. I'm not sure. And I hate feeling that way. As a former Marine, former police officer, I'm not sure. You know what I mean? Which way that I don't think we can survive another 4 years of Trump. I don't think our district can survive another 2 years of Gosar. I don't. But the question is, how do we fix it? And I think it boils down to people with the same spirit and character, such as you and Chuck, that understand I'm not imprisoned by a party.
Absolutely, because Chuck and I we've been married for 56 years now.
Wow.
And we will tell you, we voted for the person we felt deserved our vote.
Absolutely.
That we wanted. We never
Sure.
voted straight party. We voted for the person.
And people need to know that that's okay.
Yes.
Democrats and Republicans alike, independent, it's okay.
Well, and there are times we both X'd out each other's vote. And,
You mean you
know,
didn't do everything, G?
Let me interject this, that I was a Republican. I was born and raised in Texas. And pretty much everybody knows that when you're born with an R stamp right on your forehead. And you're a
The
Republican.
big red one, right?
But, and I was a staunch Republican for many years, and I joined the Postal Service and started changing my point of view and what I was looking at and what I wanted, and actually I chose to change my party to Democrat because I wanted to represent the working man in the Postal Service.
Wow.
And that's what led me to what I did in the post office for the last 18 years that I was in, which is I was a union official for the Phoenix metro area local. And Patty and I have discussed, she was a Republican, I was a Democrat, I changed my party to Democrat. And we talked about the candidates that were on the ballot. What did we want from them? What did we want to see happen? And a lot of the times we agreed, and a lot of times we disagreed. But I think that's what politics is supposed to be about.
Sure.
Being able to discuss the problem, what are the avenues you can take to resolve the problem, and just quit the animosity.
Sure.
Look each other in the eye and say, this is what I would like to see.
Sure.
Is there anything you would like to change? Here are the things maybe I can change. And I just don't think we see that cohesiveness in the politicians any longer.
Yeah.
It's my party or
Yeah.
no party.
My way or the highway politics.
That's it.
Yeah. So if you had, and I want to talk to you about something a little more personal, but if you had a group of staunch Republicans here, or staunch Democrats for that matter, because it happens on both sides, and you wanted to discuss with them, give them some pointers about how to approach an election, particularly an election like this, where this is just, some folks feel like they're choosing between the lesser of two evils. There's this disinterest. There's this, people are just disenfranchised about this stuff. What would be some of the pointers you would tell them about, hey, yeah, I'm a Republican, but all of this Trump stuff and Gosar stuff, I don't agree with that stuff. What advice would you give them about, so that they feel free to do what they need to do for the sake of the country?
Well, as you know, when we had the meet and greet here at our home for you, we invited several of our Republican friends and independent friends. And I always feel like they need to listen. And as you know, they all said at the end that they were going to vote for you.
Sure.
But that is the problem, is that people aren't willing to listen.
Yeah.
People are not willing to engage. A lot of times I will ask a friend, okay, what is it that you don't like about the Democrats? Well, they spend too much money. It's usually, or we're turning into a socialistic country. Okay, would you like to hear what I don't like about the Republicans? And after a few minutes, they kind of cut me off. Because if that's the only two items that you can discuss, it's like, wait a minute, no, be honest. Because I can tell you there are a few things that the Democrats do that I don't like, but they're working for the overall of the country. They're not looking to dictate to you their normal beliefs.
Sure.
And I think that's what's hard for some Republicans to understand, is that it's a different world. People need help today.
Sure.
the cost of things have gone up over a period of 60 years.
Yeah.
Because I can remember when we were first married, my grocery budget was $10 a week. I can't even go to the store to buy a loaf of bread and milk for $10.
You're not going to make it out of McDonald's drive-through with $10.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think you have to make it more on a personal,
Sure.
everyday occurrence, not just the rhetoric that's going on. So, okay, if you think we're better off now, how are we better? And I'm talking to a Republican, like when Trump was in office, they would say, well, we're better off now. Well, how? It was shocking to me that no one could ever answer that. They just listened to the rhetoric. Though it's difficult, we will be honest and tell you we have lost some Republican friends over our belief. And it's tough because becoming a Democrat opened my eyes to what the Republican general is saying that people are believing. I find it saddened that they're not thinking about the best for the people, for the community. They're thinking and have been brainwashed to think what's best for the party.
Sure.
So it is difficult. The only thing you can do is try.
Yeah.
We'll have friends that when we go out, they'll say something and I'll go, have you Googled that?
Yeah.
And that's what's surprising, because I've done that. I go, well, let's Google it. And then you prove to them that what they believe is not what was said or what was done. And so you end up losing friends that way, because now you've shown them that that's not true.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
You know, what's interesting about this is, and this is a comment that Patty made to me, that we were at a restaurant, and good friend of ours we've known for 15 years. And Patty was sitting there talking to her, and she had her Democratic tag on. And our friend says, and you're a Democrat? I'm thinking, why can't I just be Chuck? Why do I have to be Chuck the Democrat?
Right.
And then what does that have to do with living?
Right. It is.
And I'm thinking that's what we've come down to in this
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
Red and blue.
They find a reason to dislike you because you are a Democrat, even though the
Even
reason,
though they did have
and it's not
clue.
very valid at all. Oh, I'm just a Democrat, not the guy.
I don't know, it boggles my mind.
Sure.
I don't understand it, why I just can't be the person.
Right.
Like we've
Who
been
are
your
your friends?
friends all
Yeah.
these years.
15 years. Wow. I see that, because, of course we get some of the posts and replies and comments and stuff on social media, and some of it's like literally mind-boggling. Some of it, no, just the voice of the Democrat, they'll agree with everything you say until they find out you're a Democrat.
Exactly.
It's just like, is this where we are or where we want to go? That's why when you get that ballot in your hand, if you're an early voter, or you got to do some soul searching without the purview of party, because in that ballot box, first of all, nobody's going to know when you're approaching that ballot box in November whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, except for you, unless you got on some paraphernalia or something. And nobody's going to know what you do with that ballot except for you and the people that you let know. And I think Republicans, independents, Democrats have to really do some soul searching and look for some safe off ramps, I should say, points of egress, till we can get out of this gridlock. And I told a group of Republicans, I said, listen, what I'm asking you for is just 2 years. After 2 years, if you don't like me, that's fine. I'm a safe on-ramp so you can get away from Gosar, who you still don't like. You don't like him. You're a Republican. You don't like him. You know he's no good. You know he's not going to do. Well, he gave us something. Yeah, just because someone may have done something good for you doesn't mean that they are actually good for you. They could be good to you and not good for you. It's time to get away from all of that stuff and some of the stuff that he says, and I don't want to get into all of that because start running up my blood pressure, and it's too close to Saturday for that. But just get away from all of that stuff and make a conscious decision. If I'm not your guy after 2 years, go find another reasonable Republican and let him run against me. And if he runs against me and he wins, guess what? I can promise you I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go tell somebody to go cheat. I'm not going to tell somebody to go to the electorates to vote for something. I'm not going to deny an election. I'm not going to pout and whine and sue everybody and pull a old Carrie Lakeism. I'm not going to do. I'm going to shake this man's hand and say, "You're the next congressman. Keep serving the people."
Yeah.
I'm honored to have you as my congressman. You don't have to cheat. You don't have to. What's wrong with Gosar doing that? What's wrong with you? Because that's what if we don't respect our electoral processes and voting rights and all of that stuff, it's like, where are we? And so I think everybody, Republicans, Independents, Democrats, have to really get to that ballot box and do some soul searching, because this will determine the heart of this nation. This is the stress test about where we are, we can't survive another 4 years of that with the direction that we're headed in.
Well, I have family that have been involved in politics in other countries. And I remember my freshman year in college going to Spain. I had an uncle who was in charge of the Air Force and one in charge of the Army under Franco. Mm-hmm. The entire time my girlfriend and I were in Spain, we had to have Spanish Secret Service with us 24/7. Is that what you want for our country?
Wow.
Because that is what's happening to some of our politicians today.
Yeah.
They are having to pay for security for their families around the clock. I may have only done it for a month, but it's not the world I want to live in.
Yeah, no.
I want to be in a country where I can speak my mind when I want to speak my mind, and nothing will happen to me. I have the right to do that.
Yeah.
I think now people are getting to a point where I have family and friends who aren't on Facebook anymore because they don't want to receive the political information, because they're afraid if Trump wins again, they're going to come after them because of something negative about Trump or the Republican Party is going to get them in trouble.
Wow.
I don't want to live in that world.
And none of us should.
No,
Yeah.
It's not a happy place to be.
Yeah.
And if you've traveled in other countries, I'm fortunate. My father was a TWA captain, so I was able to travel.
You got any buddy passes? No, I'm just playing.
TWA isn't in existence anymore.
The TWA doesn't fly anymore.
You know, so it was been there, done that, and have seen how other countries have lived.
Sure.
I was always grateful when I came back to this country. And when I went to Europe on my own for the first time in my freshman year in college, that was when all the Vietnam protests were going on. And I was so grateful that I was home. I kept saying to myself, what are you protesting? Why are you doing this? Do you understand how lucky we are as a nation? And Chuck can tell, as coming back home as a Vietnam veteran, they were treated horrible.
Wow.
And those are the things that it wasn't right at the time, but you know what? People had a right to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
May have been a terrible thing to do to these poor men that were drafted over there, but at least they weren't arrested for doing it. They had that right.
Yeah.
Why are we taking away everybody's rights?
Yeah. And I think that is a part of the trajectory of what's at stake at this election tomorrow. Speaking of rights, I want to talk to you about something a little more personal. Well, obviously, the reproductive rights. It's a big conversation right now.
Yes, it is.
Unfortunately, it's every election cycle. It's hijacked for political purposes. And it's unfortunate because this is really personal to families, to women, and it's at the forefront of the ballot this year. You know, from the presidential race, congressional races, state races. In our state, it'll be on the ballot. The issue of itself. We have this 1864 law that I'm not sure what these folks down at the State House were thinking. Well, they used to say people that don't think too well shouldn't think too much. Some of these folks, I'm not sure, but, they should have been doing any thinking at all about this. Reproductive rights. You're a Democrat now, former Republican. Where should we be? Reproductive rights.
Well, as my husband, dear sweet husband, will tell you, and he's on my side, we've got to convince,
100%.
this is my soapbox. Even as a Republican, I will start out by letting you know my history.
Sure.
And that is that I was born as an illegitimate child, but I still believe in abortions. Mm-hmm. My mother was fortunate because obviously it was right after World War II. She lived with my grandmother and my aunt. So I grew up having 3 wonderful mothers. And she had all this financial support she needed. They lived together. They raised me together. My mom and dad got married a year after I was born. And I call him my dad. Now, when I was born and you were illegitimate, they used to put on your birth certificate illegitimate.
Yeah.
And of course, that law changed many years ago. One of the things people forget, going back to 1860 and up until the early 1900s, doctors never examined women internally. They did not have the medical equipment or the experience or the knowledge then that they have today. When abortions were first made legal, there were a lot of women that did get an abortion for birth control. The thing that people forget is that birth control pills were not available until the 1960s. And when they were available, after we were married, I worked at a lab that was doing research. Most birth control pills at that time caused cancer in women. So now you're moving into the era of IUDs. And in today's society, because there are more available contraceptions, only 11% of the population is getting an abortion due to birth control. All the abortions are due for medical reasons. Before they were made legal, I had a tubal pregnancy when we were living in Texas.
You had a tubal pregnancy.
I had a tubal pregnancy, and those were against the law to abort that. Well, to me, that's not an abortion because it's a non-viable fetus. It's in your tubes. And I was grateful and lucky. I didn't realize at the time how lucky I was that I had a doctor that secretly performed that procedure and said to me, "I'm sorry, I may have messed that up for you. So when you go home, if you have a blood clot when you urinate, realize that that is the fetus." That's how they had to handle it back then. And he said to me, "Now in 72 hours, I need you to come back to make sure that you don't have an infection."
Wow.
Now a coworker, I was 22 at the time, and a coworker was 24. She had a tubal pregnancy, and her doctor did nothing. So her tube exploded, and her ovary had to be removed.
Jeez.
My question today is, if you have a wife or a girlfriend or a daughter who has a tubal pregnancy, you're allowed in the labor room and delivery rooms now. You weren't back then. Are you going to hold her hand while she's screaming bloody murder while her tube explodes? People don't understand that. The term late-term abortion is not true. When a fetus is removed after 6 months, when you're entering the trimester, it's because there's a medical issue, because no doctor will abort a fetus that late in the term, because many babies can still exist, go into neonatal clinics and ICUs when they're 4 and 5 months old.
Yeah.
But when you're talking late-term abortion, you're talking about a woman, and you're going to make her carry a stillborn baby until 9 months when the doctors can legally start taking that fetus. They can legally allow you to do that, or they can surgically remove it. I have a friend in Texas, her sister had twins, and it was in 1973, and before abortions were legal in Texas. One of the twins had a bowel movement in the sac.
Inside the sack.
She and the other twin was fine, but she had to carry both of those twins until the first one was, the live baby was born. She, knowing all that time that this fetus was dead, that the baby was dead, she had to carry it. I just can't imagine anyone having to go through that. It's bad enough that she lost one twin because of something that had nothing to do with her biology, her anatomy. Chuck's aunt, when abortions were legal in California and New York, she had to fly to New York to get an abortion because the fetus had an IUD embedded in the baby's brain, but she wasn't allowed to get the abortion in Texas.
Because of the law.
Because of the law. And then I have a friend who unfortunately was attacked in New York. She was our next door neighbor that I grew up with in Tustin. And she was in the hospital in New York for 4 weeks. She was walking through Central Park during the day when she was attacked. Her dad was a doctor, her mom was a nurse. They had to fly her to Hong Kong to get an abortion.
Wow.
Because once she was released at the hospital in New York, they weren't allowed to do the abortion. Fortunately, we knew the doctor in Hong Kong. He was a gold medal diver in the Olympics, and he practiced at the local country club that we were at, so we all knew him. But her parents had to fly her to Hong Kong to get that abortion.
Wow.
And the fact that people are not understanding that medicine has improved. When my kids were born, there were no such thing as sonograms. They could only tell if a fetus was alive by listening to the heartbeat.
With the
there were no
stethoscope.
Equipment, they would put
Oh,
the
the little
monitor on your stomach and listen to the heartbeat. There were no monitors to tell you anything. You weren't hooked up to see if the baby was in distress or not. In today's society, think how fortunate we are. No one wants to lose a baby. No one, when you work hard to be pregnant and you want that to happen to you, I just can't imagine anything more heartbreaking than losing a child.
A child. And thank you for sharing that. Because it's, you listed out so many different instances where the variables, and you're not going to get a cleanly, neat, packaged that addresses this. It's a conversation that, first of all, a bunch of men need to be around the table talking about, because it's not our. I have 8 children, but I've never had a baby grow inside of me. So I don't. There's an experience that we're so far removed from by nature of us being men. But secondarily, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a scientist. So there's a whole lot of variables and things that I simply don't understand. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll say it over and over again. We need to be talking to women and doctors about this whole concept. And some of us that don't know what the heck we're talking about need to hush. And as you mentioned earlier, listen. Because the whole conversation about late-term abortions, you're absolutely right. It's not happening. It's being used as a scare tactic. I've had people go to the extremes of saying, well, they're letting people at 9 months taking babies out and putting vacuums in the back of their spinal cord and sucking the brains out of the baby. And I said to myself, well, where are they doing that? Because can you imagine it? It's just it's a bunch of empty, hollow, naked assertions that have no facts associated with them at all. And when you list out these variables in these different instances, I've had to deal with the rape victims in a pastoral capacity, molestation victims and incest victims in a pastoral and in a capacity as a police officer. How dare anybody tell a young woman whose body has been violated by a predator do you understand the psychological impact on this woman, the emotion? A lot of it turns into self-hatred. A lot of them end up committing suicide. They take it up on themselves to say, what did I do to cause this? Mm-hmm. And for Paul Gosar, Mitch McConnell, Marjorie Taylor Greene, any of these other people to tell a young woman, these folks down here at our state house that with this 1864 junk that they were talking about, you have to carry this baby. You have to, well, to hold on. I don't see it. To me, it's so confusing that it's hard to even to put words around it. Who do you think you are to tell someone this woman has been violated? Many of them lost their virginity. Just the viciousness of having to go through a rape test procedure at the hospital alone, how volatile that is. And then the indignity to the woman, for someone to want a law passed that allow no room, zero room for any of that. I think it's fundamentally wrong.
Absolutely.
I think it's cruel. I think it's ignorant. If I could say it that strong, I think it's just outright ignorant. I think whoever tries to use the scripture or their faith to prop up that type of divisive opinion, I think they're wrong. I think they're wrong. I think they're wrong theologically. I think we've wandered into a place for political expedience that we were never meant to be in.
Well, and as you've known, we've discussed this before, I used to teach school. And my experience at the school, 1 year, 24 freshmen came to school pregnant. That
24.
means they got pregnant when they were in the 8th grade. How many of those were incest or rape? How many of those were innocents not knowing that they could be pregnant?
Wow.
That's a lot of girls coming to their freshman year in high school already pregnant. It's criminal. I've spoken to my doctor, and she said girls at that age, their bodies are not made to carry babies. They're not made to deliver.
Yeah.
And one thing, and I know this will sound terrible to some people, but little girls can start their periods at the age of 9. So if there's incest or rape, are you going to tell me that a 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old girl should carry a baby? They have to live with that the rest of their life, having had incest, which is, let's face it, it's sexual assault, any way you go about that. That these young girls, they're going to live with that the rest of their life. And part of the problem is that for some of these families, they don't go to court because they, as you know, as an attorney, you get into some of these cases and the defense attorney will say to these little girls, well, didn't you enjoy it? It was your first time. And I'm going, how can you treat a child like that? Today, that is not as prominent as it used to be in our generation, but that is why a lot of young ladies and children and parents decided that they weren't going to take them to court because they could not handle that child being treated that way again.
And another thing about that, Patty, and this is not highlighted a lot either, but spousal rape is a real thing.
Yes.
Today, spousal rape is a real thing. And you mentioned that they won't call the police. They won't go to court about it because, especially when you have male-dominant homes where the husband is the breadwinner, and this wife knows if I call the police on him and tell him he's forcing sex upon or rape him, then the breadwinner's gone. Then what am I going to do with me and these other children? If I take them to court, I'm going to lose everything that I have. And so they won't do it because they know that they're getting rid of the breadwinner. And you'd be surprised how many women today in 2024 are experiencing spousal rape. Many of them end up pregnant. And the only safe private space that they have to address something that they did not want is with their gynecologist, their OBGYN doctor. And for a bunch of folks in Washington that don't know what's going on at that house, it's so far-fetched, you know. I think it's, you know, like my son Jericho says, you're doing too much. I think folks are just doing too much with this. And I think, again, we've wandered off into an area for political expediency. Many folks doing it in the name of religion. That I don't think we were meant to be there. And again, I've been in the hospital room where, with stillborns, I've eulogized them at funerals and seen them laying in little coffins with hands or bodies no bigger than the palm of my hand. I've been there, done that. I've seen them fresh out of the womb, laying on a mother's chest, gone. But these were decisions that mothers and parents should have the right to make. And even I, when I have to go to these situations in a ministerial capacity, if somebody's 80 years old or didn't have some critical illness or whatnot, and they're trying to determine whether to discontinue life support or something to that nature. But this is what you hear a lot from the far right. Well, we're protecting the folks that can't speak for themselves and all of this stuff. And I get what you're trying to say, but, folks sound real good as long as you're not listening to them. They sound real good as long as you're not listening to them. And, we're trying to protect those that can't speak for themselves. And blah, 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 blah. Okay, all right. So you're trying to protect the kids because the kid can't speak for himself. Okay, that's your theory. But let's advance that to an 80-year-old that had some critical illness, 40-year-old that has some critical illness or some incident or accident, and they're on life support. You don't call the congressman to find out if it's okay to take them off life support. You don't call. This is a family situation. It's a family matter. They get the information from their doctor. They talk with their religious, whatever faith system that they come from. And they make it. Even when I go in there in a ministerial capacity, I have never, in all of these years of ministry, told a family, "Well, I think it's time for you to pull the plug. Oh, leave them on the machine," because that's not my job. My job is to support them in their decision, because it's personal to them, regardless of whether someone has a brain injury from a car accident or some long-term illness. Those are decisions that are left for the family. And in that instance, whether that person stays on life support or not, you're speaking up for those that can't speak for themselves, because in that moment, they can't speak for themselves. But who's making the decision? It's not Congress. It ain't Donald Trump. It ain't Paul Gosar or Andy Biggs or Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's left up to a family and their faith systems and what it is that they're supposed to be resolving amongst themselves.
And they're medical professionals.
Absolutely.
Because when we were faced with that, with my mother, it was they gave me the information
That's it.
I needed. And so why are politicians interfering with a medical decision for a woman? That makes totally no sense. From a party who works on the premise less government. Where's your less government in this?
Yeah.
Why are you interfering? So tell me, the 14-year-old student I had who said to me, she started crying and I don't want to go home tonight. Well, why? Because it's my turn to sleep with my mother's boyfriend tonight. It's my turn to stay in his apartment, is how she put it.
Wow.
So what are you going to do for that 14-year-old child? So you call CPS, and guess what? She's older than 12, and they don't have the resources to help her.
Wow.
So how do you deal with those kinds of things? Or another student I had who, her and her cousin were gang sexually assaulted when out on 75th and Indian School when it used to be farmland. And they were hung up in the tree. She survived. Her cousin died. Luckily, this kind-hearted farmer drove by, saw them, put them to cut the ropes, put them in the back of his truck, because back then there were no cell phones. Those are the kinds of things that are hideous.
Sure.
So this young girl, luckily she was allowed to have an abortion, but think about what she went through.
Sure.
She was 12 years old when this happened, actually. She was in my class when she was 14. It took her 2 years to come back to school.
Yeah.
She was very timid at the time. Those are the things that I don't think people are understanding what's happening.
Sure.
And you are 100% right with women whose husbands are doing terrible things. My mother and my aunt, before abortions were legal, they worked for Planned Parenthood with American doctors. Our family doctor was one of them. They owned a clinic in Tijuana, and they would take turns driving these women down there to get abortions. 98% of them were married women.
Yeah. Impregnated wrongfully by their husbands.
Yeah. And they weren't allowed to have birth control pills because heaven forbid, they'd come home from work drunk and, whatever. And I remember I used to ask my mom and my aunt, because one would stay and watch the children. Well, the other one drove them down to Tijuana. Yeah. Well, in Orange County to Tijuana back then only took an hour and a half. Now it takes 3 because of the traffic. But it was like, aren't you afraid when the husband comes home? Oh, well, we tell them that they had an emergency and they're at their doctor's office and your mom's bringing them home in a minute. That was how they had to do that so secretly back then.
And there are so many variables, and we could, talk about this for long hours. Yeah, there, variables like how a woman menstruates and how soon will she be able to know she's pregnant. There are these excessive bans and restrictions and all of that. I think it just interferes too much with the right to privacy. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Any law has to balance out the right to privacy and public policy. And there's some things that public policy, especially public policy that's based on religious preference, cannot trump a person's right to privacy. You know what I mean? We're getting into things that, that I don't think, we rightfully need to be in those areas. And again, concerning the issue of abortion, you big on sex trafficking and all that stuff. Well, these two things, so how are you going to fight sex trafficking, but you do know most of these young women that are sex trafficked end up pregnant, right? So we're gonna go hard on sex trafficking, and we're gonna throw all the sex traffickers in jail. But you young women that were sex trafficked, you're gonna keep these. Well, come on now, you know what I mean? One of these things is not like the other. It's fundamental things like you mentioned. Claim to be the party of less government. Well, where is it concerning this? And I think this is where we're failing. And I know, let me give you the last word of this, because I'm I could go on and on about this because it's a sticky issue, but it's at the forefront of this election.
Well, for me, as you can imagine, for my age, it's a little embarrassing to talk about some of these things. But I was a person who only had a period every 8 to 12 months. So
Wow.
how am I supposed to know in 6 weeks I'm pregnant?
Wow.
So there are many variables. And I'm not the only person that happens to, because I found out from my gynecologist a few years back, that's why I had uterine cancer.
Wow.
Because of that. And I said to her, well, why didn't they tell me that when I was younger? And she goes, they've just recently discovered that. And so there are a lot of things that the medical profession knows that lawmakers have no clue about. They should not be involved
Sure.
in any of
Yeah.
that whatsoever.
Sure.
Like you had mentioned earlier, when someone is dying and they ask you to pull the plug, okay, so now are you going to go in and legislate when they can do that?
Right.
Because if you're legislating a medical decision between a woman, her family, her doctor, and her faith leader, are you going to do it for everything else in our life?
Yep. Yep. Because it would it's the same thing. You know, this is all fruit. And I think, and I'll say this, and then we'll wrap up. And let's not pound the table so hard about pro-life. That's a pro-lie. That's what that is, because you can't have laws that are as restrictive as this 1864 law that these folks downtown are trying to force down women's throats and down families' throats, and you're forcing folks to, or I should say, restricting their rights concerning their reproductive rights. But then you have no, first of all, you want to take food stamps and welfare from them. You're gonna keep this. You're gonna walk this out full term. But we're gonna take the Affordable Care Act away. So we ain't gonna give you no health insurance. We're gonna make you, you're gonna have to pick between Similac and your prescription. God help you if you get a yeast infection or something, or need to do something. Nope. You're gonna pick between buying a $40 can of Similac and buying groceries for your other kids. We're gonna take your food stamps from you. We're not gonna give you any daycare subsidies or nothing. We're gonna make you work a whole 40 hours. We're not gonna give you any FMLA and time off or anything. And oh, by the way, you're a woman. We're not gonna pay you as much as we pay the men. We don't care about Lily Ledbetter. We're gonna do exactly what we want to do. You're gonna work twice as hard for this to have to pay. But you're gonna keep this kid now. And you can't afford to live in nice neighborhoods like this, so we're going to send you down to Central Phoenix, right, and smack dab in the middle of the hood where the schools are overrun, overwhelmed, less resources and stuff. We're going to pick which books you get to read out of, and we're going to teach you chunks of history that benefits stuff. This is what we're going to do, all of this stuff. Then you're going to get out, you're going to get a low-paying job. We're going to eat up all of your retirement because we're going to gamble your money off with these our big buddy oil companies and mess up your pension. This is pro-life now. This is what they're telling us. This is pro-life. If you decide to keep the kid, you got a pretty crappy road. When the kid gets ready to go to college, he's not going to have as many opportunities as everybody else. He's going to pay more for it, and we're going to beat up anybody that tries to forgive their school loans and whatnot, and you're just going to work. And by the time you get to retirement, start praying that some Social Security is out together, and we're pro-life. Or if you decide to give the kid up for adoption, we ain't supporting no adoptive parents. We're not doing any of that stuff. You're on your own after the election's over. That's what pro-life means. And somebody needs to tell you. Pro-life means after the election is over, you're on your own, and we'll come back and talk to you about this again 4 years from now. That's what it is.
That's true. When Chuck would say to friends about that, he would say, so how many children have you adopted?
That's it.
How many children do you foster care? How much do you donate to an orphanage? How many times do you go to an orphanage and help play with the children or read to the children? Are you lowering daycare costs so that a mother can go to work?
Yep.
Because it's no longer $150 a week, it's $1,500 per child. I mean, it makes no sense.
When I listen to some of the stuff that, folks say, having to prop up President Trump and Gosar and all of these other folks, it reminds me of what my mother used to say. If somebody has to make that many excuses and give that many explanations, you can best believe that somebody somewhere is lying.
Yes.
And I think that's where we are. We have too many. Everything this man says, we have to prop him back up. But that's not what he meant. Well, hell, how many times do we have to go through this and talk about what he did? Does he not? This man, 70-some years old. You mean tell me he hadn't figured out how to say what he means and mean what he said? I'm 28 plus shipping and handling, and I figured that out. Say what you mean and mean what you. I think we've got Patty, Chuck. We could talk about this forever.
I know we really can,
so,
can't we?
Thank you all
you're
so
welcome.
much for allowing me into your home again. I love it here. I'm thinking about taking an extra bedroom upstairs. I won't be too big of a burden. Speaking of adoption, since we're here.
Yeah,
Can I say one thing?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We support you, Quacy. We love you. We think you'll do a fabulous job in the position you're running for. Yeah. And myself, my name is Chuck Wyrick. I live in Festival Foothills, and I approve this conversation.
Thank you, Chuck. I love you all too so much. You're near and dear to my heart. Thank you, Patty, for sharing very personal things.
You're welcome.
It matters, and I'm hopeful. I entered this race because it's not because I didn't have nothing else to do. I believe, and there's a better choice. And sometimes, if not you, then who? And I really think that this moment kind of knocked on my door and said, all right, why sit here and die? Get up and do something. And this is our moment. We're writing the story of how the West was won, and I think we'll do some great things together. So thank you. And
you're welcome.
Let's keep lifting up a nation, conversations like this that matter. To all of you that tuned in today, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the challenge that we face. It's an amazing podcast because of folks like you that keep watching it, that keep sharing it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please visit us on social media, wherever good information, factual information can be found. We are there, and we look forward to seeing you out on the campaign trail. Come visit us at one of our events, and let's keep pushing for change in 2024 in this election. There is a better choice, and the choice is yours. We'll see you next time right here on The Challenge That We Face.